Hi everybody, it's Eri here again. Sorry if I sound a bit off, I have another cold. When I filmed my previous video I was just getting over one and now I've got one again. But I couldn't help it. Today I've had a huge wave of motivation and I really want to do this particular vlog. It might be one of the last Autistic Diaries that I do for a while because, to be honest, I can't really think of anything else really. Unless somebody can ask me a question, or I can have a series of questions. I could do a Q&A, or I could come up with something quite inspirational. But I thought it was time I finally did it. I thought it was time I finally explained how I went about going to the doctor in the first place to say I think I have autism, because it's not something that you think of overnight. It was a long time. It took about almost a year for me to actually pluck up the courage and do it. I'll start at the very beginning, where the first time I ever heard about autism, I think I was about 9 or 10. My mum and I were watching a film called Silent Fall, which is, I think, the first film that Liv Tyler ever did. She plays the big sister of a 9-year-old, I think he's a 9-year-old boy, who has autism and who has witnessed the murder of his and the older girl's parents. And there's a big thing about who did it, and it's a really good whodunit film, and it's very interesting because the supposed only witness is this young boy as well as the killer. This young boy was mute for the most part, although he could mimic voices. He had immense strength. I remember he couldn't eat anything round, but was very very affectionate and loyal. It was a really good film. It got panned by the critics, it really did, but I actually think it was a brilliant, brilliant film. And before this I'd never heard of autism, but my mother, who at the time was a family editor for the First Social Services, she said to me, yes, he's got a condition called autism, and I said, well, I've never heard of it, what is it? And she said to me, well, no one really knows what it is, and that was echoed in the film as well. The big sister was asked what autism is, and I think her explanation, to the best of my knowledge, because I haven't seen it in over 20 years, I think her answer was a cocoon builds around the child so they don't interact with the world in the same way. And the police officer or psychologist, I forget who he was, corrected her and said, no, nobody knows what autism is. They know what the signs are, but they don't know what it is. They don't know what causes it. They don't know whether, you know, exactly. It's like migraines, you know, that's another neurological condition that baffles doctors and scientists. They don't really know what it is, but they know what symptoms it exhibits, therefore they give the symptoms a name. I'd never even considered autism at all. I had never even entertained the possibility that I might have autism. If anyone had ever suggested, I was really? No, because I, like many people, thought that autism was a medical condition that would be extremely obvious, that you'd be either mute or have very noticeable learning and behavioural difficulties and real developmental problems. But now we know that there are milder forms of autism, and that's one of the ones that I have. I have autism to a moderate degree. But it was usually only people that had severe autism who would be referred for a diagnosis or be considered for a diagnosis. So yeah, I went through the next 20 odd years of my life never even wondering about what it could be. The beginning of 2013, no, it was the beginning of 2012. It was just after Sherlock Series 2 had aired, and if anyone of you has seen my first ever vlog that's on this channel, you'll see there's a bit of a story about how my partner and I started getting into Sherlock, and it really inspired my writing. I became obsessed with Sherlock, like many people. I read loads of fanfiction, I wrote fanfiction, I was constantly googling Reichenbach Fall theories. I was watching a lot of other Benedict Cumberbatch stuff. I was started to watch Doctor Who again, even though I wasn't much of a Whovian before. I was obsessed with it. It was always at the forefront of my mind. And all the way through 2012, I watched the shows again and again and again. And if you've seen the Hounds of Baskerville, you'll notice that at a particular part, when the three guys, Sherlock, John and Greg Lestrade, are walking out of the hotel, restaurant, pub, whatever it is, and John makes a remark about Sherlock possibly having Asperger's, but it's more said with a question mark. Asperger's? Because even John, as a medical doctor, doesn't know. And I'd heard of as I said, I'd already heard of autism way back when, on and off, little bits and pieces here and there. Of course, I, like many people, heard about these studies that showed that possibly autism was linked with vaccines, which was later refuted. I then decided that I would investigate the character of Sherlock Holmes psychologically. So I did a lot of Googling. I didn't just look up things to do with Sherlock Holmes. I Googled Asperger's specifically. I'd seen people on television talking about it. I didn't quite know exactly what it was about, so I started to educate myself just out of curiosity as to what it was. I then went and moved on to learning about Savant syndrome. My obsession evolved. I still was obsessed with Sherlock, but I started to research savantism, and there are many wonderful savants in the world, and quite a lot of them are autistic or have Asperger's. And I remember I was reading a lot of interviews with people with Asperger's just to see what their lives are like. And one of the main things that I saw was that people with Asperger's have issues socialising. I wasn't looking for something in common I had with some of the people whose interviews I read, because don't forget, I've said before that I had massive issues socialising, but I always thought it was because I had an attitude or I was rude. Even I thought that, and I couldn't figure out how I could curb it. I just put it down to me being a rude person, as everybody said that I was, even though quite a lot of the time I didn't know why people thought that way about me, and I was thinking, well, obviously I haven't learnt my lessons. But back to the point about the interviews with people with autism, with Asperger's and autism, is I also went onto forums to find out about testimonies about people with the condition, and particularly about the social issues that they had. And the reason for that is because I heard in an interview one particular savant who had a diagnosis of autism later in life. He said that he had to teach himself social skills. He had to learn how to take jokes. He had to learn that people don't necessarily say exactly what they mean, and that you can't take at face value exactly what somebody says as what they mean. And things need to be interpreted, and you have to learn when you can speak in a conversation, when you can't, when it's appropriate to change the subject or not, what is the best and most appropriate response to something. He had to learn that systematically, and he had to educate himself all the way through his life just to get by on the social side of things. At this point, I didn't think at all that I had autism. I just thought, this is actually something I can personally identify with. This is very interesting. So I looked at forums, and I heard of the people with Asperger's, that there were more people being diagnosed with Asperger's and autism later in life, and that social skills were one of the main culprits. And I was looking at them to try and see if I could find a way that they had either successfully or unsuccessfully tried to adapt to the social world, and maybe there was something I could extract from that I could use for me. I don't remember that there being a specific point that I said I might have autism or Asperger's. It was more of a seed that grew. I feel I actually have read testimony from people who, for the first time in my life, I can actually identify with. So I looked into it more, and again the seed grew. Maybe my social issues are because I might fall into that category. But there was another voice in my head go, no, you don't have it. And I researched it more and more, but if anything I was trying to refute it. I was trying to find symptoms and signs that I could say, nope, that's not me, nope, that's not me, just the social side of things. Because don't forget, to have a diagnosis of autism, you have to hit a criteria in several different sections, I suppose, or factions, or many different criteria, not just the social side of things. So I was trying to find things that I could say that I didn't have. But the more I looked into it, the more I found things that rang true for me, that not all of them did, because there's no one model type of autism. But I read things like balance issues, coordination, difficulties with left and right, tying shoelaces. I remember I was about 7 before I learnt to tie a shoelace, because I couldn't get the left and right the right way round, and when I couldn't get it I used to get very frustrated, and my mother was very patient with me and she showed me how to tighten it, and what I was trying to do was mimic exactly what she was doing rather than follow instructions. And other things like not being able to understand people's motives, and sometimes like not being able to follow the plot or the meaning or an emotional meaning of a film. I had all those issues, but there was a clincher. There was one thing, it may sound very trivial, but there was one clincher that made me think, I have to take this seriously. And that was, I read, I think it was on the National Autistic Society website, I think I read on there that people with autism will have such an issue with coordination sometimes, and depth perception, that they will have a phobia of walking downstairs. And when I read that, I've always had that phobia. Even now, I cannot look ahead and walk down. I have to look at every step. I can't carry something downstairs because I lose my left and right. I have to hold onto a banister. Even the stairs at my mum's house that I lived at for 20 years, I couldn't walk down them without looking at them. And I can't run downstairs. And it's also the same for hills and slopes. There's a massive hill range where I live, and I could get up it reasonably okay, a bit of a struggle, but going down, I had to go on my bum. I couldn't walk down it. And ladders as well, I have to look down at the ladder step and then put my foot down. I cannot just walk backwards. And going upstairs when I was a child, it wasn't until I was 10, but all the way through that first decade of my life, from when I learnt to walk, I would always go up the stairs on all fours. I couldn't do it any other way. And also, when I do go upstairs, I only put the ball of my foot on the step. It's something I do instinctively. I don't plant my whole foot on the step. I have fallen downstairs several times. At one point I slipped and was airborne before I hit the floor. I didn't hurt myself too bad. I've tripped upstairs so many times, and I just put it down to me being clumsy. But my other half picked up on the fact that I was generally very spatially unaware. I bump into things even though I knew they were there. I wasn't very good at telling how far a distance I was from something. I'd walk what I think was around something and it would be through something. So the staircase thing was the clincher for me, that really, not only it made the seed go poof. That was it when I said, there's something in this. There's something here that might explain how I was. And that happened around about a year after I started watching Sherlock. So it was around January 2013. And I said to my partner, you know, I'm always having these issues. There's a moth around here. I said to my partner, you know, I'm always having these issues around socialising, and you know, you say that I've got balance problems, all of that. I think I might have Asperger's. And she's, what? I think I might be on the autistic spectrum. And of course she was like, no, of course you're not. And I said, well, this is what I found out. And she still was like, no, that can't be it. We'd have known by now. And I said, well, actually, I've read here a lot of women in particular have previously in the past been misdiagnosed as having bipolar disorder, which is back in the 80s would have been called manic depression. depression and anxiety, borderline personality disorder. It's possible that I might fit somewhere on the spectrum. But again, she said, well, I don't think so. And I think in a way I was kind of halfway there. I wasn't quite sure. I looked on several websites about am I autistic, and I came across what I said in the first video of the Autistic Diaries was something called the AQ50 test. And this test consists of 50 questions, and you answer them as likely, slightly likely or something. Oh no, slightly agree, absolutely, slightly disagree, or something along those lines. I scored 39 out of 50. And I then looked at the criteria and it placed me in the pretty much definite category. I presented that to my partner and she said, well, okay, but that doesn't mean that you are, because it's not a diagnostic test. It's one of the things that they will look at and take into account, but in itself, you can't conclude that somebody's autistic just by that test, even if they score 50. You have to go through channels to get a diagnosis. I looked at other websites as well to see if I could find any different kind of questionnaires, and I did. Some I think were probably not legitimate, not constructed or pioneered by real psychologists, but I took them anyway, and they all pretty much showed that I was in that particular area. I then watched videos. I found out about what help out there is. But the one thing that was holding me back, or there were a couple of things that hold me back from having a diagnosis, two main things. One of them was, even if I'm diagnosed, it doesn't change anything. Nothing can be done. There's nothing. You can have things like cognitive behavioural therapy, which I'm having at the moment. You can learn social skills, etc., etc., but there's nothing that can be done medically. There's no breakthrough. Another thing that held me back was I have always had a massive fear of doctors, and I really didn't want to go into a doctor's surgery and have to submit myself to physical exams. So that was one of the things that I looked up about, are there physical exams for autism? And some of the websites I looked at said they might ask you to do certain, like, you know, touch your nose with your middle finger, that kind of thing. But then the confirmation was from the National Autistic Society was that there is no physical or biological test for autism. But it said you need to be sometimes persistent with a GP, because there isn't a lot of awareness out there, even among GPs, let alone the public, about, you know, what autism is. I spoke to somebody at work who doesn't work there anymore, but he was going through the same thing, and I only found that out by accident. And I said to him, I think that I am as well, and I'm umming and ahhing about whether I should go to the doctor. And he said, well, this is how it is with me. His father had been diagnosed newly at the age of about 54, I think. And his younger brother had been diagnosed, and he was on had just started the journey. And his doctor was quite understanding and said, well, before I refer you, I want to get an opinion from someone at the local trust. And if you watch the first video that I did of the Autism Diaries, it will explain exactly how that came about. So I'm not going to go through that again. But I eventually did get a doctor's appointment, and I printed off the AQ50 test. I printed off a personal testimony of mine that I'd written over quite a long period. And one thing that did help was my manager at the time at work. She had previously worked with people with autism, and she had to say I was one of the best managers I've ever had. She was an amazing, amazing manager, and she was just leaving the department, and we had our final one-to-one, and I said to her, I think there is a reason for my behaviour. I think I might be on the spectrum. And this made me almost cry when she said it. She said, your social skills do seem quite acquired. They don't seem to come from here, and she pointed at her gut. They come from here. And she nailed it when she said that. I felt like crying. I felt somebody finally recognises it. I was always pulled up on my people skills at work. And there was one particular incident, and I did touch on this on the first video, where I was accused at work of being aggressive. I was then pulled aside and they said, look, Erin, that was quite aggressive. It was not called for. And we got into a discussion and I said, look, I think there is a medical reason why I sometimes behave this way, because I don't understand, or I get frustrated when other people seem to be aware of something I'm not, or if I don't get what people are talking about. It does upset me, it does frustrate me, and I know it's upsetting and frustrating for everybody else, and I really am sorry, but I do think there's a medical reason for it. And one of those managers said to me, so when you do say something quite rude or, you know, quite, again, aggressively, do you realise you're doing it? And I said, unless you're pulled up, and I said, no, I don't. Many people perceive people with autism as having lack of empathy. It's not lack of empathy, I suppose it's a different kind of empathy. I do feel empathy, but I don't always realise exactly how other people may feel in the situation that I'm in, because all I can recognise is how the situation I'm in, rather than how other people feel and think being in that same situation. Then you start to feel guilty, and I've said before, I apologise to everybody all the time, because I have to just take it at face value that I'm saying something wrong all the time, because I'm not always pulled up on it. And I've said to people, I really do want you to pull me up on it. They don't always. At that point, I was pretty much convinced that I had autism, but there was always a part of me thinking, but what if it isn't? What if I'm not diagnosed? Or what if it comes back that there is another reason why I am the way I am? But I just couldn't put it any other way. I didn't do any other kind of online tests or look up any other kind of behavioural or psychological or neurological condition that would explain my behaviour. I thought, no, just see if you're autistic first, and if you're not, move on. And then it took until December 2015 before I finally had the assessment, and it was very anticlimactic. It was the gentleman who diagnosed me was very, very nice, and he was very, very, how can I put it, I wouldn't say sympathetic, but he understood what I was talking about. He gave me advice about how to deal with it with other people. He told me that it's up to me if I want to tell people, and I've said, well, of course I'll tell people. I finally had an answer as to what it was, but that doesn't mean it was all lovely and peachy and rosy afterwards. It wasn't. It still isn't. It helps because now I know that I am, and I can say that I am. I have diagnostic papers. I have like a certificate to show that I am. I can disclose it to whoever needs to know. It's on my medical records, so if I ever go into hospital for something, they'll know that I have autism. In that sense, it's good, but it's confirmation of the first fear that I had, which was, what can be done about it? Nothing. Really, honestly, nothing. And I kind of went through a stage where I was thinking, why should I have to change for the world? And there's me thinking that, but at the same time berating myself for being, lack of a better term, narcissistic, because everybody has to change or be a certain way to be in a society of other human beings and be accepted. Everybody does. But with people with autism, it's that much harder, and it's absolutely exhausting to have your mind switched on all the time thinking, oh, what do I say, what can't I say, you know, oh, that worked, that situation, or maybe I should just not say anything. And quite a lot of the time, that's why a lot of people with autism are very quiet, because they don't want to risk upsetting somebody. And and they may be completely oblivious when they have, because I just don't understand why someone's upset when that's not how it was intended. Do I wish that I didn't have autism? Yeah, at times I do. But I would rather have it than not, because it's the only way that I know how to be, because it's part of me and it always has been, and I can't imagine my personality being any different. I mean, I don't know where my personality starts and the autism ends, or vice versa. I don't know which bit is which, so all I can say is it's all one entity. And I don't really want to be anyone other than myself. I like being unique. When I was at school I didn't, I really didn't. But I do like being unique. So as I said, this might be the last one I do, unless I can think of something. Like I could do one on obsessions maybe, about what my obsessions as a child were and what they are now. How I was hoping to get maybe somebody else or other people on this video to talk about what it's like knowing someone with autism, or how they get around my various quirks. There are other people out there that are going through what they're going through, and that those with high functioning autism, they're not people that need a slap. They're not people that need a kick up the backside or have to buck their ideas up. There are reasons why they are how they are. And unfortunately, being high functioning is kind of detrimental, because if you are perceived as being a regular person, you're expected to be a regular person in every way, shape or form, and when you're not in some areas, that gets people's backs up and they get kind of frustrated with you. But there are people out there who know what you're going through, and I'd love to set up my own autism group where I live, or I'd love to, I don't know, do a collab with someone where we just talk about it and vent about it. Whether it's live or not, I don't know. And I think maybe next year in March, National Autism Awareness Week, I might do some bits and pieces for that as well. So I'm going to try and come up with more ideas, and I'm hoping to do some more writing vlogs too, because I haven't done a lot of that, and I haven't written anything since I published my book. Not really. I've done maybe a bit of planning of my second novel, but that's it. I've been focused on university for most of it. But anyway, I hope you guys are okay, and thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you want, I don't care. Say what you want in the comments, I don't care. But if you're going to be trolling, if you're going to be nasty or whatever, I'm not going to bother replying. You're not worth it. And so, all the best. Bye peeps, bye.